Okay, so this is a really unique panel. I'm excited to moderate it. It's unique in that it is what you have here in terms of the talent that's in front of me is full circle when it comes to DTC, in other words, direct to consumer, and order fulfillment. And when we talk about these things, I think it's just important to lay some groundwork. DTC, traditionally in cannabis, we're talking about literally the direct to consumer, let's say the last mile to get the consumer the product that they want. But there are other elements of direct to consumer. And I think what you're going to hear today is that there is a little bit of leapfrogging opportunity that does exist, where it doesn't have to be just relationship between retailer and that end consumer. And I think you'll hear about, in particular, some brands who are very eager to have that direct relationship with the consumer and not be reliant on their retail partner. Not to say that they're not important partners, but understandably, a brand wants to be in direct communication with the people that love their brand. So with that being said, I'll let the team here introduce themselves, and I'll explain a bit more about this kind of full circle aspect that we have. So yeah, Andrea, would you like to kick off?
Sure. I'm Andrea. I'm the CEO of Sava. We are a Bay Area-based branded e-commerce platform that happens to do our own order fulfillment.
Hey everyone, I'm Ning, CEO and co-founder of Nabis. We're the largest licensed wholesale distribution platform based in California. We work with amazing partners on the brand side like Sundae and retail partners like Sava. And we support currently about 20% of the legal cannabis market in the state.
Hello, I'm Day. I'm the founder and the creative director of Sundae. We are a Seoul and Los Angeles-based cannabis brand, as well as lifestyle apparel brand, and glad to be here.
I'm Andrew Watson, CEO and one of the founders of Happy Cabbage Analytics. We're a retail optimization platform, work with great partners like Sava to help them utilize their data to target marketing to their customers, do operations better, basically figure out how to be better at retail using their own information easily.
Yeah, thank you. So just to kind of make it easy to understand, if you think about the flow of product, starting from the source and ending with the customer, in this table, you would be starting with Day and with Sundae School. And depending on how he's structured his business, his product needs to get to retail, being retail delivery or retail in store. And he relies in that sense on a distribution partner. In this case, that's Vince. And then it can carry on into going to the final route, let's say direct to consumer, which is Andrea. And in the midst of that, in between those steps, Andrew is helping retailers better understand who their customers are, who are the ones that actually do care about a particular brand and who don't seem to care as much. So that's why this panel is so unique, and I think we're going to get a lot out of this conversation. One last thing to note, our conversation here is necessarily California based. That's where all of these teams are based, and frankly, it's where the most developed and most sophisticated interplay between these kind of four different stakeholders is yeah, it's the most well developed. So so let's get it started. I think Day, I'd love to start to hear it because you're kind of the source here. Tell us a little bit about, from a brand's perspective, what is it like to be a brand in California, and how have you kind of carved your own niche out with your customers?
Yeah, so we sell cannabis products in the state of California. We sell edibles. They're called mochi gummies. If you haven't tried them, you should try them. They're great. We sell at Sava. And probably around 200 retail stores in California. And we sell soft goods. We call it smokeware, your uniform for your recreational cannabis consumption, online, direct to consumer through Shopify. You know, for us, it's been an interesting journey because we did not start out as a cannabis brand. we really focused on our apparel and really focused on our community. And especially like brands of this day and age, must really rely on community as well as content in order to really showcase what the brand means. And it was actually our fan base that told us that we should launch gummies, which is how we got into the game. Obviously, as if you guys don't know, now you know, it's a little tough right now in the California market, especially with regs and that are ever changing, as well as restrictions of safe banking. But that being said, for us, we've been able to test out some interesting ideas. Our main thesis is that whether it's through apparel, whether it's through accessories, whether it's through actual flower, medicated goods, cannabis is really about the culture. Cannabis is really about the consumers. So for us, we've been able to kind of carve out very interesting activations where we can work with retail partners to help them bring traffic. That's one thing that we're really good at. So for instance, this past November, for us, our outerwear is the strongest. We sell fleece outerwear, which is, a big business for us. And, it sold out in 1 hour and 30 minutes online. And then we brought those fleeces, we reserved some of them. We reserved around 700 of them to bring it to our retail partners in the Bay Area, namely Harborside, Apothecarium, and we were able to bring 700 customers to the door. And I think a quote was, "I've never seen these many Asian people at our display before." But because of that, and also, for instance, for Outside Lands, which is a festival, a lot of dispensaries, a lot of brands pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out a 2-day pop-up shop at their festival grounds. For us, we did none of that, but we sold our hoodies, collab hoodies to the festival. And we are, I can say proudly, the only brand that made money through that activity. So for us, it's just like, we cannot play, we don't grow, we co-pack. So, in the value chain of things for operational efficiency, we really focus on, product development as well as, marketing and sales in order to bring value to the consumers and bring value to our retailers and bring value to our distributors, however we can.
That's wonderful. And I think just a theme that hopefully the audience has gathered from the last day and today is that competition is increasing across the board. That includes dispensaries. And when you think about, let's say, if you were the only shop in town for some period of time, you were kind of living off the fat of the land. And the reality is there are going to be more competitors, more retail doors that come in. And from the retailer's perspective, that can be kind of scary. You might be used to a lot of traffic and suddenly you have someone that you're sharing traffic with. So when Dave's talking about the ability to drive 700 people into a store, that makes a huge difference when you're talking about 100 plus, probably more in your case, average tickets. That can make or break a week or even a month, depending on the dispensary. So on that point, just I guess to continue on this, so brands, I think we got some sense of maybe what a very forward-thinking brand is doing. But Andrea, I'd love to hear what your perspective is on brands and siloed e-commerce. How do they approach that, and how do you all kind of try to solve this challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I would say few different things. I very much believe in the power of brands, and I think to survive, one needs to have a strong brand, and that includes e-commerce. So for my company, Sava, we are quite differentiated from other e-commerce and delivery companies. We focus on older adults. Our average customer age is 47. 60% of our demographic are women, and we have a very specific curation standard. So to get on the platform, it is competitive. It's a multi-month process, and then a brand needs to fit multiple categories. I also have an inherent bias towards more of a marketplace approach than a siloed D2C, being that that is what Sava is. We are a curated marketplace. Being a marketplace will inherently give us certain advantages because we have our own technology, front end and back end. We can also be leveraging our SEO to get out there. And so the partnerships we build with brands and the relationship we have with our audience, which is a very loyal customer base. My very first customer, when we launched in 2015, is still a customer today. She lives in a retirement community in Walnut Creek. This is the type of relationships we build as a brand. And so as we grow with the brands on our platform, we're exposing them to this very loyal base that trusts me, my curation team, and thus is more willing to take a leap and try new products because we have given it as Sava approved. So I also very much in this climate understand why brands want to have that direct contact with a customer. We try at Sava to give a lot of transparency and do the best that we can as a marketplace to have as much connection as we can. I think there are limitations with siloed D2C because depending on the brand you are, you may not have everything that a customer wants. And the way that I shop, I do shop at Whole Foods and get all my different things rather than going and get my skin cream at this online store and this and this and this. I personally don't shop in a siloed way. So I think it really comes down to whether that can succeed or not, how big and powerful the brand's following. It takes a lot of marketing dollars. We've seen the contraction. Marketing budgets, unfortunately, have been getting cut. So how successful will siloed D2C be? I have doubts, but I also think some brands, if they have that strong relationship, if they've been around for years, they can maximize that. But again, I more look for a mutually beneficial relationship with the brands that we work with, that we're helping to build their audience as they're helping us to build ours.
So yeah, I think to draw, there's two distinctions we have here. One is as it relates to Sava, you have, let's say, a differentiated approach as opposed to some platforms like Ease, which presumes that consumer wants the product immediately, and that's the most important thing. I think Sava is, you want to explain a little bit?
Yeah, so
Approaches there?
yeah, so our brand is different. Also, the way we do delivery is different. So we do more of Instacart approach than Postmates. So there are many reasons we do this, and it really comes down to economic units and how to make the delivery model work. So we more ask our customer to fill up their cart for the week or the month or maybe the next couple months, depending on what they purchase, rather than we're going to get you your pizza now. So we're more Instacart versus Ease or Breast or whatever is more Postmates and focus on getting you something quick. So we do not compete in the quickest, cheapest game, AKA the race to the bottom. I think this harms all companies. And so we focus more on quality experience, getting you the products that you want. And we have found that when customers place orders, 60% of them place for next day. You can get it same day. You can actually get things from us in a 3-hour turnaround, depending on where you are in the Bay. But most people choose to schedule it out. And in fact, you've seen pretty much all large deliveries in the state follow our lead. We've always done scheduled, and you've seen more companies bring that in.
So that's great. I'd love to maybe also add an extra distinction here, is that what's unique about the cannabis industry, and something that I personally love about it, is that there's no world where we're going to be downloading weed from the cloud. Doesn't happen. It's a physical good. No matter what form factor it is, it can't be downloaded. So there's this physicality to the industry, what some would call the intersection of atoms and bits. And I think, Vince, I'd love to hear your take on this. There's kind of, in my mind, an open debate. Does DTC even work? And in relation to, let's say, there's clearly a desire for delivery and marketplace. From the distributor's perspective, how do you think that plays out?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen is actually delivery businesses as a percentage of our volume has actually increased over the past few years from roughly around 8-9% now to close to 20% of our platform. And I think that sort of demonstrates the power of consumer demand and their preferences and how they'd like to order. I mean, it could also be the CAC spend on the delivery platforms as well. But, with all that being said, I think, it's definitely a channel that is here to stay. And I think as the industry continues to mature, brands are going to want to be omni-channel. They're going to want to sell into retail because there's just consumers that enjoy that in-store consumer experience. And then there's going to be the people that know exactly what they want and will buy it from a direct-to-consumer channel, whether it's because of the delivery SLA or they just like the pricing there, or what have you, or they like the connection with the platform.
And so for you, are you agnostic whether you are servicing a retail operation that is only doing delivery versus a retail operation that is doing retail only or some hybrid? Does that change the calculus for you?
I mean, it certainly changes the unit economics internally, but I think long-term from a value proposition perspective, because we view the future state as being omni-channel, we're here to support all ends of the market and try to provide sort of universal access for brands to get into the market. So in many ways, yes, we're an agnostic platform. We serve over 300 brands today exclusively, but we don't handle their sales. We provide pretty much every other tool that we can, whether it's data or financing solutions or, even a marketplace as well to help drive exposure. But we really try to allow the brand to get as close to that consumer relationship as possible. And at least within the distribution world, we try to actually get out of the way of the narrative and the storytelling process that we could do on behalf of a brand. But, I think it's safe to say that we would never be able to do as good of a job as the brand could do themselves. And so, in many ways, we try to get out of the way for a brand to be able to find their own best path to market. And I think that could mean very different things for different brands too, because, certain brands do well with in-store displays versus others just, are better at online marketing. So, from that perspective, I think, we've always just taken the stance that we want to support as many brands as possible and try to fit as much of the retail market as possible and try to be as flexible of a platform.
Got it.
Yeah.
And we've been spending a lot of time, I think, through this conference talking about how important that root understanding of the consumer is, because otherwise we're just making guesses. So Andrea, I'd love to hear your take on what does the data tell us about the consumer's interest or, let's say demand for delivery, DTC, in more of a broad sense.
Yeah, well, so I think there are a lot of consumers out there. Right. And so I think on a super high level, do we observe, I think something you described as brand promiscuity amongst the average consumer? Yes. Right. That does exist. Do we see more volume of people walking through stores? Yes. That being said, there is definitely a large and valuable market associated with consumers who only purchase through delivery and are brand loyal, particularly when it comes to products that are more like the edibles, the vapes, the things that are like more like form factor based, and their ticket sizes are astronomical, right? And that's, it proves like that demand and that consumer set existing is why a business like Sava is able to like survive and thrive, right? Is like, you have people who are buying from a specific brand 5 times the amount that an average consumer in store would be buying of that same brand, right, in one go. And they're loyal to it and they respond to when the brand runs discounts. They respond to when the brand launches new products. So I think the biggest question comes down to a little bit of, one, how can you go after that consumer set with good unit economics? Because again, like they are sometimes outweighed by the masses who are still trying to like sort themselves out. And how can you also identify where that TAM exists and how to sort throughout? And digital channels are a really easy way to do that, right? It's an easy way to get in front of a lot of eyeballs across the entirety of the Bay Area instead of trying to just get, hey, people who live in 3 miles of me or a mile of me in the Mission District to see my brand because I'm at a store physically standing there.
Yeah. And the shortcoming there is that if you're a brand like Sundae School, it could very well be that a retail partner of yours would or would not like to share the information about who is in their customer list that might be relevant for your brand. For what it's worth, there are customer information and data compliance questions that I think we'll talk about later today. But I think, Dave, I would love to hear, you started off talking about some of the creative approaches that you have pursued to build that relationship with the end customer, but you didn't get to that point off of day one. I think, as you had explained to me, there's a bit of a journey in terms of some of the learnings as you've kind of gotten close to that customer. Can you kind of talk us through some of what you've learned and maybe even mistakes, if you're willing to share them?
Yeah, sure. So, 4 years ago, started the Instagram. Now we are at 100,000 followers, all organic. We have, I think last year we had 30,000 e-commerce consumers. I think in total we have 55,000 credit card information on file on our Shopify. Love Shopify. Shopify, if you're watching this.
But don't get into it.
Stay where you are.
Because of this kind of unique position and unique communication channels that we have with our consumers, and out of which 25% live in Los Angeles, and 10% live in the Bay Area. So we were like, we are so primed to disrupt. We are so primed to launch our own DTC business, and we did with partnership with Grassdoor, but it just doesn't work. And maybe it works for some people, but for us, it didn't work because even when we would peak, there are some days when we drop clothing items, when we make, more than $100,000. There are multiple days like those. And when, as we kind of correlate that with cannabis drops, there's some days when we used to see a huge spike in volume. But because of the regulations of, the truck can only have up to a certain amount of products, and because of the scheduling aspect where you have to show the ID and whatnot, if you look at Drizzly, it's the dispensaries it's the alcohol liquor stores that are running the last mile deliveries, not Casamigos. And, for us to be able to rely on inventory allocations across different depots, which really falls under the brand, beyond the individual contribution margin of sale of a product, the time spent on our team to be able to market this. And, for us, I think we do have a structural advantage because of our customer database, and we can send emails, we can send SMSs, but even still, it was, losing money. And, we tried it for a few months, and I said, guys, this is not worth. Let's focus on core business. So, now what we do is, we have a rank of the retail partners that we work with. We run digital promotions with them. We run physical activations with them in order to enable commerce and get a steady inventory projection going with the partners that we work with. For instance, with MedMen last December, we had a great activation a lot of it was digital. And, we saw an order volume increase of 80% this January, and they paid out all the invoices. So I was like, yes, let's go. So for us, we're just continuing to iterate on what can we do, with our limited resources, what's the best value that we can provide our consumers, our retail partners, and eventually us, so that we can make this ecosystem work.
Right. There's an important, another elephant in the room that's been talked about a lot, I think, regulation, thinking about it on a municipal basis. And in many ways, by setting the rules of the game, I wonder sometimes if regulators really understand the impact of some of the rules that they put in place. They say that they want something like consumers to be able to get cannabis delivered to them, but then they make certain rules that make it incredibly difficult. I think you both can maybe speak a little bit to that if you have either particular states or particular rules that can kind of call out.
I mean, it's probably more acute for you guys.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, I think in general, so again, looking at what works for us and what I believe works for delivery in general is you need to have that nice cart size that's going to support all the logistical burn really that goes into delivering product. And that's where there are these problems with brand siloed D2C. What we have in common is both delivery and distribution. It's not always the biggest margin because of all the logistics, but when you look into other states, and I am very thankful this did not happen in California, but as delivery regulations are coming online in some states, there's a requirement to have 2 drivers in a vehicle. I do not see any way that that can work. As someone who looks at numbers every day for over 5 years, and all the tweaks we need to do to make, to get to break even, to get to even a little bit cash flow positive. When you add in that other driver, which we are required to have as an employee, and I'm proud that our drivers are employees. My drivers are all cross-trained in my office so that my staff is more of a, ecosystem where everyone is on the same plane. But having those expenses with drivers as employers and then putting an extra driver in that car, it wouldn't work for us. The amount of funding we would need would change drastically. So when I see that states are implementing this, to me, it just reads that they don't actually want delivery to happen at all because it's so much more of a burn when that's something we all struggle with already.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, there's kind of 2 areas that it makes a difference on the distribution side. One is similar to Andrew's business. We have to set up warehouses in different municipalities, and there's always nuances with taxes, with how the warehouse needs to be set up and compliance. And you always have to go talk to the city as well in terms of zoning, just because, cannabis, a warehouse is pretty large. And so they don't want it next to schools and things like that. And like every municipality has their own, especially in California, because it's so municipality driven, they have their own little preferences. And that kind of makes it really hard to scale a business across a state, let alone a country. And so that definitely changes up the unit economics of our business, depending on the region in which we're hiring in and setting up shop. And I think as far as like how we want to support the D2C side of things, it's really just trying to lower those costs for ourselves so that we can continue to provide a service level where we can provide the fastest turnaround time on delivery with low or no MOQs, like minimum order quantities. So I think for a delivery business that doesn't have as big of a back office, which is like the whole goal, it's like a headless kind of delivery platform. That way they can order more frequently, not have to tie up more of their cash and inventory, and still be able to get span of diversity of products as they please, which makes the marketplace work better.
Yeah, so I think a question for all of you. Do you think that verticalized, let's say the multi-state operator approach, how does that fit with what we're talking about? Does it fit? And I'm just curious, like, do you see, because we're talking mostly from a California standpoint, notably, you've had a number of large MSOs just completely give up on the market.
Yep.
I'm here to tell you there's still growth in that market. So what do you think is going through their head? Do you think this is something that they can even do better or not better?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess the term MSO is kind of like blending together these days with just a typical, like, I think the definition of words like multi-state operator, but there's so many operators now that are multi-state, whether it's white label, that I think.
What's more appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, I think a further distinction would be like, when I started in the business, it was like 2017, it was MSO meant like limited licensed medical operator, vertical. So I think those are the ones that actually can do direct to consumer delivery pretty well because they actually own the entire vertical. And as a result, they actually get all the product feedback as well from the consumer and they can invest without having to, they just have to invest in inventory once. And then once the order comes in, they can, send it through the supply chain rather than have to tie up, a ton more cash on inventory that might or might not sell through specifically the direct consumer channel, because they have other ways of offloading that product, namely brick and mortar. So, I mean, I think them coming into California has been difficult because I don't think anyone has that much capital to go tackle California. It's just such a beast in a vertical way. And there's so much specialization going on in the state that from coming from like a very low competitive environment to a very high competitive environment, they just like have never cut their teeth in such a way that they're able to succeed. So I'm sure many of you saw the Curaleaf announcement the other day. They're sort of pulling back a lot of their reins on their California expansion. And then, holistic industries and a lot of those businesses are realizing that California is not easy. I think
Because it's not limited license.
it's not limited license. So they're,
Real competition.
yeah, I mean, maybe retreating has like a bad connotation, but they are kind of pulling back towards those limited license, higher EBITDA generating markets and really trying to play a protectionist game so that they continue to be the only game in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In traditional e-com businesses, there is only one metric, CAC, LTV over CAC. That's all you really need to know. That's all you need to monitor. But because of the supply of licenses, especially in California, they're giving them out like, it's Halloween. Versus like Illinois, right? Or Massachusetts, where it's much more controlled. Because of that, competition, obviously, as you mentioned, flourishes. And at the end of the day, I cannot compete against someone selling, we sell our gummies for like $20 on retail. When people, sometimes run discounts and sell them for $6, like even I sometimes buy those gummies because they're $6, I love a good deal. So I get it. And as, competition intensifies, the CAC burden, at the end of the day goes to the brands to get, because there's, again, a limited number of customers that are coming to these retail locations, these e-commerce platforms. And I think at the end of the day, in order for California brands to truly stand out on their own, one is, operational efficiency. That's why the verticalized brands, they can offer stuff cheaper than we can, obviously, or to have a unique product offering or unique emotional offering that the brand gives in order to really stand out in the market so that you carve your own niche. For us, we are obviously still trying to figure it out, but we found early success with our mochi gummies, which are, rice, flour, tapioca flavor, vegan, keto-friendly gummies. And, for us, we really honed in on flavors, from our team's backgrounds, a lot of, we have a boba tea flavor inspired by getting gongcha after church. So, trying to build a lot of those like personal stories into the product, as well as offer stuff that no one else can offer as well as we can.
And I can vouch that if there's ever time where we're out of stock for a few days, there's customers that go on a wait list.
Yeah.
Because they are attached to Sunday school. And so my customers, and it's like something comes back in stock, then we notify our wait list of customers.
Great sign.
Well, I think what it calls out is that there's just, California is massive. Like it is the 5th largest, 6th largest economy on the planet. And with cannabis, because everything's so razor thin, and because of the municipalities, and because you have all these communities, then nuance matters. Like getting the unit economics right for your brand, your distribution, your delivery, for your population, for your consumer, like matters. And centralized corporate structures run on rinse and repeat plans, right? They don't do well with nuance, right?
I don't think it's possible for a large, whatever you want to call them these days, licensed multi-state operator to produce something like what Sunday School has done. And if just as an allegory here, it's not like Hershey's is putting out new products. They're acquiring brands.
Yeah.
Like we talk a lot about how cannabis one day will be like CPG. Well, look at the signs. It's not like any big CPG company really has much innovation to speak of. yes, they have operational dials tuned to a T, but when it comes to newness and connecting with the customer, they're awful at that.
Yeah.
I think one more thing I wanted to, before we go to questions, there's one more part of the calculation of LTV, which for those who don't know, is lifetime value, CAC, with customer acquisition cost. That's also churn. And Andrew, I'd love to hear if you have any comments about churn in this general discussion.
Yeah, I mean, high level, in retailers in California that we look at, about 50% of your consumers who shop with you 3 or more times have not shopped in the last 90 days-ish, over about an 18-month to 2-year time period. Consumers shop, they shop around a lot. And therefore, a lot of investments are constantly made on new consumer acquisition to constantly refill the bucket. And then on, I would say, relatively simplistic measures to retain, to close the holes in the bucket, which are basically things everyone's doing. So therefore, like, they're not actually differentiation on retention, because, you know, if everyone can get 25% off, if you haven't come in the last 30 days at any shop, then, you know, you're not going to actually get that, right? And that's where I think education and loyalty come from. Like, there is some unlock in the emotion of a consumer having a concept of, I'm in love with this retail brand or presence. I get the box and I open the box and there's the nice, like, little paper in the box with the nice, like, that's what Sava they send you. Right. You know what I mean? But like, they have that, or from the brand itself, that people miss. I think people miss a lot. And when you don't have that, and it is hard, you're forced to dump cash into constantly getting new customers through the door.
I think another like factor on that is really with black market too. I was in New York this week, and when I saw, you know, these New York dispensaries open, there were lines around the block, you know, 4-block radius. I went to one of the dispensaries that opened during peak hours. There was no one there because there were trucks selling weed for half the price right outside, and there were lines around those trucks, you know. So I think it's really interesting. Obviously, you know, hopefully, but still in California, black market is so much more massive than the white market. So I think how the government, you know, like what they did with moonshine back in the day, you know, how the regulators really come into place to really curb these activities to provide safer cannabis goods for everyone will be paramount. So.
I think now it's time for questions. So if we have any questions.
I have a virtual question. It says, for delivery and distribution, how important it is to widen your state coverage. I think that's in relation to, I think it was talking about like California being such a big state.
Okay. So the question is, how important is it for delivery and distribution to have, let's say, a very wide swath of a state? So I think maybe we're talking about density versus whatever the opposite, width, breadth, let's say.
It's interesting. I think there's always like, which stakeholder do you please the most? And I think if you're being customer centric, it'd be being a statewide distributor gets you everywhere. You know, even if a brand doesn't sell to those far flung regions because of cost or whatever, it's still like, you know, people stick to your platform because you provide that potential offer. But obviously the economics don't necessarily always make sense for us. And so, you know, a lot of our more denser areas of the state are you know, margin drivers, and then the others are just more loss leaders as a marketing tool in many ways. But I do think that there are certain areas like Shasta or Needles that have a lot of density too, or a lot of volume being driven there. They know they're far, like the retail stores there, they know they're far away, and they know it's really hard to get a truck to come out to where they are. So they order gigantic orders. And so that makes it worthwhile then as well. So, you know, I said this earlier on another panel, we really treat our retailers and brands as partners. And so from that perspective, we want to deliver to them. And, we just have a conversation to see if they can up their minimum order sizes. And that's what makes, the world go around for everyone. But, I do think that most of the volume is still centered around the major metro areas. And, one of the first things we actually did launching in California was to be a statewide distributor. Even if it was just for like the perception value of being able to do it. But yeah.
Makes it easier for the retailer because for some brands that we work with, they might have different distributors in the north and in the south, and and then there's these differing schedules. And from a retailer, I want consistency. So knowing, for Nabis comes every Wednesday, and that's our Nabis day. We know when to get our orders in by. And that helps us organize our sales and promotions. If it's a smaller distributor that might have wildly differing schedule changes, that makes it very hard for us to maximize that partnership.
Totally.
Because marketing is important and our content is important for our brand. And it doesn't just mean discounts, it means that our education, telling the story, who's behind this product, why do they make this, what's special about it? And every time there's a delay in delivery, it can change our entire marketing calendar. So it's like all the different things, consistent. I mean, it's critical in many other areas, but in terms of a distributor, for me, that's very important, is knowing every time, like, that this is a concrete weekly schedule.
Yeah. I mean, I think if the question was geared more towards like as a brand, if you're launching, I think it's better to start in more major metro areas because you can service it with fewer salespeople. And I think one sort of like business adage is just that it's always better to make 100 customers love you than 1,000 just like you.
Sure.
It's like the best way to kind of start a fire. And I think from that perspective, it's better to over service the customers you have in the more denser areas to get going, and then you can kind of figure out the rest. But
I do think though, and I'm just looking at it, particularly looking at trends of delivery operations in Oakland in terms of how they try to go out and in and out and in. There is a feedback loop of turning on a new zip code, dropping a weed maps pin, getting more orders as this it's getting people to use it as an easy tactic to get more sales, but then the unit economics don't make any sense. 2 months later, 3 months later, the weed map spin brings you nothing, and then you got to go back. Right, and it's just, but to your point, getting that core group to be loyal is significantly more valuable. It's just more difficult.
It's more difficult. Yeah.
I think it's knowing where your consumers are, where they live. We're very happy Nabis is statewide because we started really out in Los Angeles metropolitan area, went up to the Bay, and then San Diego, and then now we're going to Sacramento. We're taking the hyper local approach, kind of like what Yelp and Foursquare used to do, to get the density in that population, to make sure there's a network effect, as you mentioned, that definitely amplifies the word of mouth in a more concentrated regions. But for us, I think 60% of our consumers are 21 to 35. And for areas that are more, beyond, Santa Barbara, like Montecito, most of the people are over 35. So that's not a priority region for us, so we are very happy that you are statewide.
Any other question? Yes.
Makes you also, but basically you guys deal with data. Just not if you've been emotional.
Yeah.
But you rely on those two. Create that grants and you build a brand one of those. It's possible to take that, incorporate somehow to the data, find out where that's emotional. But some say Andrea, how do you take that?
The question is, I think we've heard from both Sava and Sundae School how they both have created an emotional connection for their customers. Then we have two individuals very much on operations and or data both. how do we marry these two things? Do we see signs of emotional connection in data, or are there any signals that can somehow pair these two concepts together?
Yeah, I would say yes, but it's oftentimes indicated in what's missing, right? So it's like the classic like survivorship problem. You have the story of the planes in World War II where they kept coming back and they would analyze where they were getting shot up. And then they realized that where the planes that were landing weren't getting shot was where the critical parts needed to be rearmored, because the planes that were getting shot there never landed.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it is with the data and the emotions, is there are holes in, I can't explain why this is happening. There is no like statistical effect of an event or an action or a monetary thing you did that I can point to. And yet you're up and to the right. And yet you're bringing in new customers at CACs that are ridiculous because you're not spending that much money to get new ones, right? And that hole there where you can't find anything, that's where the emotion lives, right? And then you can start to piece together and say, okay, who are those people that are coming in for no reason whatsoever and we have no idea why? Because those are the people that are getting the network effect. What are their age? What are their demographics? How often are they purchasing? Like that kind of stuff. That's where you can start to understand that. But it's really looking at what you can't explain gets at what's happening on the ground, I would say.
I think from my perspective, it kind of is the other way around. It starts with the emotional side. Like Day is really good at doing the 0 to 1 and getting the emotional side, through to the customer. And then the data starts surfacing. I don't think it's like, take a look at the data and then go sell. I think it's kind of like, let's start with the customer feedback directly first, and then analyze the data to see what other sort of correlated characteristics there are.
What explains this success after the fact that it's happened? You gotta disaggregate it.
Harbor side, they've never seen anything.
Yeah.
So those things you tell probably this. That's what was together. And you tell when these things are happening, and you give as an example, as other brands should act.
I think, in my clothing business, it's really easy to know what led, there's clear attribution of how we got there. We don't really run ads, but we get lucky sometimes, and some of our TikToks get million views, and through TikTok analytics, which is pretty bare bone, I know what the 15-second video completion rate is. I know where the 30-second, I know where that drop off is, right? And when I iterate on content to sell through, or to sell through other goods that are adjacent goods to increase the cart value, there's informed decisions. But in cannabis, one, because we don't do DTC and we rely on partners like Sava and other dispos, there's lack of data sharing. There's a lack of data transparency that we get from the retailers. But then more importantly, the retailers themselves are so, unless it's like a platform like Sava, most retailers, it's just people doing clickers and people coming into the store, and the bud tenders are not writing down, oh, this person, went here. And then there's versus even stores like Abercrombie and Fitch, they track people's movements. They know where, they went to the intimate section and then to the fragrance section. So hopefully, as more kind of omni-channel tools get provided for this regulated market, maybe there's a way for us to collaborate with data providers, with retailers, with distributors. But, for now, just regarding cannabis, it feels like I'm shooting shots in the dark. And sometimes some lands and sometimes I'm shooting blanks. And based on those, I can kind of have a somewhat educated, but not super educated decision on how to allocate budget.
I think you're more educated than most, is with all of you and solving these problems. So I think that's all the time we have, but thank you so much